breaking news, President Trump's Justice Department moving to drop the federal corruption case against the New York City Mayor Eric Adams. This is according to a memo which we've just obtained here at CNN. It reads in part, quote, "The Justice Department has reached this conclusion without assessing the strength of the evidence or the legal theories on which the case is based." The charges against the Democrat were brought by then President Biden's Justice Department last year, marking the first prosecution of a sitting mayor in the modern history of New York City. All right, let's go straight to Paula Reed. Paula, it's pretty stunning here what they're saying. They reached this conclusion without assessing the strength of the evidence or the legal theories on which the case is based. That's just a sort of, makes you stop in your tracks for a second. It does come after Adams attended the president's inauguration. He met with Trump at his Florida golf course. What more can you tell us about this decision by Trump's Justice Department?
Yeah, I want to get into the language in the memo, but I will say this is not much of a surprise because Trump has said publicly that he would be open to pardoning Adams. He's tried to really kind of downplay the significance of the charges that were filed against him. And as you just noted, the two have been seen in social settings multiple times. Yep. So we knew something like this was in the works, even though this is not a pardon, it's a dismissal. But what's fascinating is how much they packed into this two-page memo, including, you said they didn't assess the facts, but they were also really careful here not to throw stones at the career prosecutors, because as we know, there is a firestorm at DOJ and the FBI right now, concerns that the Trump administration is trying to purge the agency of career prosecutors. They say this in no way calls into question the integrity and the efforts of line prosecutors responsible for the case. That is definitely a deliberate inclusion there. Then they pivot to echoing what Adams has said. He has argued that he was only charged because he criticized the Biden administration's immigration policy. Right. And they lay that out and say the reason that they want to dismiss this case is so that Adams can apply more energy towards immigration enforcement. They say, quote, "Accomplishing the immigration objectives established by President Trump and the Attorney General is every bit as important, if not more so, as the objectives that the prior administration pursued." So on its face, this could look like kind of a quid pro quo. You help us with immigration, we'll get rid of that pesky case. In a footnote in this memo, they note that the acting deputy attorney general clearly stated to defense counsel during their meeting that the government is not offering to exchange a dismissal of a criminal case for Adams' assistance on immigration enforcement. So they are clearly aware of this. A source familiar with their thinking insists this is not a quid pro quo, but clearly President Trump has earned himself an ally in New York City.
So, Jeff, is this surprising?
This is one of the most bizarre situations I have ever seen. Here this guy is indicted, and by a very respected office. He makes complaints that he was politically targeted.
Right. He says because he complained about immigration under the Biden administration, he was targeted.
Which there is absolutely no evidence of. And the Justice Department now, under the new Trump administration, dismisses the case against him, but says, well, we don't know whether he's guilty or not, but we want him to fight crime. This is what happens in authoritarian countries.
They essentially were saying that fighting these charges takes away from his ability to help the Trump administration with immigration.
Correct. And this is what happens in authoritarian countries, that the rule of law is not applied equally. It's only applied to how the leader wants it applied. And Eric Adams has ingratiated himself with the Trump administration, and now he gets his case
He went to
dismissed.
Mar-a-Lago. He went down to the inauguration.
Right. And that's not how the legal system's supposed to work. Especially when the Justice Department acknowledges that the case may well be legitimate.
And Jessica, how weird is it to have a directive from the leadership of the Department of Justice?
It's extremely unusual to have the leadership of the Department of Justice reach out to a U.S. Attorney's Office and tell them at this stage to drop a case. There may be consultation before a case is brought, but once it's been brought, it's generally left to the prosecutors who are handling the case to see it through its duration. So it's highly unusual, and as Jeff said, particularly because of what's set forth in this highly unusual memo, which essentially says we're not taking any opinion on the merits of the case or the legal theories. That's not why we're directing you to drop the charges. It's because we want Mayor Adams to be able to pursue the president's immigration policies unfettered by worrying about this prosecution, and also because we think that the prosecution itself was in some ways politically tainted when it was brought from the outset. But the document reads as a very political document. There's a citation and a footnote to something that President Biden did, exchanging Victor Bout with somebody else who had been prosecuted by the Southern District of New York, who was released in a prisoner exchange under President Biden. So there's a sense in which there's this sort of like laying out old political concerns with respect to the prior administration in a document that's supposed to be about the case of Eric Adams.
John Mueller, as somebody who knows the history of New York, how weird is this in the history of New York?
Well, first of all, it's so shocking that there is literally nobody who didn't expect exactly this to happen. And we shouldn't pretend. In fact, I think you and I sat here in December and went through the theory of what was coming, which came, which is that the Justice Department would probably move to dismiss it rather than pardon it based on the strength of the case, which they actually don't address in the memo. Instead, they say it interfered with the mayor's ability to run the city. It makes reference to weaponization of government. Which
Right. It says it cannot be ignored that Mayor Adams criticized the prior administration's immigration policies before the charges were filed.
And it cryptically talks about, the recent actions of the former U.S. attorney, Damian Williams, who brought the case, which is code for he's created a website that, for all intents and purposes, has the appearances of being some kind of early stage of a campaign website. And they're accusing him of using this case to kind of jumpstart his career in politics, but again, only between the lines. So, as has already been stated here, the memo, which is usually Justice Department memos, are dry, legal, and declarative. It's dripping with politics, and it is as it appears. Now, there are legitimate arguments about the strength of the case, the lack of a quid pro quo for the alleged bribe, which is the top count, and the timing of the case. But it sure is different.
But there's a way to challenge a court case, which is to go to court and tell the judge to dismiss the case.
A motion was made by the defense, which was a very compelling motion.
It was a very good motion.
And it was dismissed by the judge. So for the prosecutor to be directed, basically to go make a motion against their interest is really strange. And remember, it's coming from Emil Bovee. This is the same individual who is the acting deputy attorney general who comes right from the very same office that brought this case, but who was Donald Trump's criminal lawyer in some of these matters.
Jessica, could charges be brought at the state level?
I'd have to think about what those would look like. I mean, these are charges that were brought under federal statutes based on a federal statute that governs bribery when somebody is working for. If it's particular to people, to organizations and cities that receive a certain amount of federal funds. It's a wire fraud statute. So we'd have to look and see what state theories might be available.
Seems unlikely.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Thank you.